guys, so with the release of Lightyear this week, I thought it would be a great time to finally update my Pixar ranking. Generally, I do them about once a year whenever the last Pixar film of the year comes out. That's why I didn't do one after Turning Red. But Pixar is just a franchise as a whole that I've grown up with. So it's going to be a lot of fun talking about all these films. Just remember, this is my personal ranking, but I will be curious to hear what your guys' rankings are in the comment section down below. So make sure you share those. I'm sure everybody's going to have a quite different ranking. But without further ado, let's get into my last place pick. With my last place pick, I have The Good Dinosaur. I've tried my hardest to get into The Good Dinosaur. I don't think it's a bad movie by any means, but every time I've rewatched it over the years, I just feel very meh as an experience. On most metrics, I just find the film to be very average. The look and tone of the film lack any sort of usual punch story-wise that I'm used to from Pixar. And when it comes to the big emotional story beats of the film, it doesn't really hook me in either. Not a terrible film by any means, but definitely my least favorite of the Pixar franchise so far. Number 25, I have Brave. There are certainly some intriguing elements in the story that Brave is trying to tell, but it's a film that seems to struggle with its identity and never fully realizes its full potential, so in the end it kind of falls flat and ends up feeling kind of bland. Being our lead character, I never found myself connecting with Merida all that much, which also kind of hindered everything to me. So it's a Pixar film that I don't really rewatch all that often. And to this day, I still don't understand how this won Best Animated Film over Wreck-It Ralph, Paranorman, or Frankenweenie. I think all of those are much better films in general than Brave. At number 24, I have Cars 2. I've never personally been a big fan of the Cars franchise in general, but I still am kind of baffled by the decision here to shift the focus of the story from Lightning McQueen over to Mater. In concept, the film has a fun idea trying to create this spy thriller type of story, which works some of the time, but I think it could have worked a lot better with a different kind of character set. It's just, like I said, the franchise in general is not one of my favorites. You'll probably notice that as the franchise ranking goes on. At number 23, I have Cars 3. I know, back-to-back Cars films, but I do think this one gets the edge because of the fact we are shifting back to Lightning McQueen as the focus, and there's a lot of fun stuff here going back to racing. Sure, it's not an extremely well-crafted story, as it does fall flat a lot of the time, especially with the very obvious plot twist, but it's enough of an improvement here to put it right above Cars 2 at least. At number 22, I have A Bug's Life. Even when I was a kid when this film first came out, I never really understood the appeal of this film, especially compared to a lot of the earlier on Pixar stuff. As I've rewatched it various times as I've gotten older, I feel like this is one of their films that has aged the poorest, not just in its animation style, but the look and feel just aren't for me. I do think, however, that the film has some great overall messaging, and Hopper as a villain is a great antagonist, although it is a little bit awkward now looking back because he was portrayed by Kevin Spacey, but nevertheless, not one of my favorite Pixar films, but, you know, it is what it is. At number 21, I have Finding Dory. This film is just like the textbook example of a serviceable sequel. Not that I needed one, but it's fine. With the film being centered around her, it does add some fun new layers to enhance Dory as a character. I'm mixed on the all-around story, as I enjoy the stuff revolving around Dory and her parents, but most of the other emotional story beats didn't work out as well for me. While it feels like a retread of the original, like I said, very serviceable sequel, it's harmless. Much like what I have at number 20, which is Monsters University, another film that's a pretty serviceable prequel to the Monsters, Inc. film. Much like with Finding Dory, I never really expected that we'd be going back and exploring the college years of all these characters, but it's a fun enough idea, even if I do feel like it is a bit safe, which is kind of an issue with a lot of prequels. You kind of have an idea where the story is going to end up by the end, so the stakes aren't really that high. The characters are so charming, though, that you can't help but enjoy the film to some degree. I feel like if Disney Plus had existed back when this film came out, it probably would have been a Disney Plus kind of movie. At number 19, I have Onward. It's kind of crazy to think that up until Lightyear coming out, that this was the last Pixar film that I saw in theaters a couple years back. I do like certain elements of Onward. I'm always going to appreciate when a film takes risks, and the fantasy aspect of the world is a lot of fun. Plus the two leads, they're so charming. You can't help but say that about Chris Pratt and Tom Holland together. They have great chemistry. I just wish the story as a whole wasn't so sloppy. The journey does have moments where it's getting really good, and then it's undercut by the characters that really took away from that main focus. As someone who's an only child, I can't really speak to the messaging of the film because it doesn't hit me as hard, but I can understand if you do have siblings why it would hit you more emotionally, but it's still a fine film, just not for me. At number 18, I have Cars, the first film. I may not be a massive fan of the Cars franchise, but there's so much charm in that very first film. It's action-packed and it's really exciting, especially the racing scenes themselves, and most of the characters are a lot of fun and very unique, especially Lightning McQueen. I think he's the best part of the film entirely. I wish I liked the franchise in general a bit more. I wish they kept on this path for the rest of the sequels, but a very fun first outing in the franchise. At number 17, I have WALL-E. It did take a few rewatches to get me to really like WALL-E. I wasn't a big fan when it came out, but on subsequent rewatches, rewatches, I found myself liking the character a bit more. It's definitely a unique Pixar experience. I'm still kind of mixed on the film itself because the first half of the film is pretty weak, but the strong second half really does save it for me here. Wally is such an adorable, endearing character, so that really does bolster the film quite a bit. If the first half was as strong as the second half, though, it would be much higher on my list. At number 16, I have Luca. This is such a sweet Pixar film. It's very endearing. There's something so fun about witnessing the friendship between these characters blossom over the course of the film because they are so charming, and it's just a very fun adventure to go on with these characters. And I know the animation itself is kind of divisive as a whole, but I quite like the animation style. I think it is visually striking and makes it unique among the other Pixar films lately, and it enhances the location of the story, which is extremely gorgeous and makes me wish I could see this film on the big screen. Hopefully one day we get a theatrical release for these films. I also just like the messaging of the film, the friendship angle, and also facing your fears. It's a very nice film. It's a very comfortable film, and I enjoy it. I just need to see it on a theater one day. At number 15, I have Turning Red. I thought this was a very cute film. It kind of targets my age demographic, you know, the people that love boy bands at a young age, and it just has that nostalgia here, and I just had a fun time watching the film. It has a lot of heart and charm, and I found the humor to be quite great with how we weave in this giant red panda. It's also quite a unique experience here for Pixar, having this coming-of-age experience, going through the process of puberty and all the stuff that comes along with it. So I'm glad that it hit that target audience so well, even though there were some detractors along the way. I love the film. I think it's a great addition to the Pixar family, and I need an actual 4-count album. At number 14, I have Incredibles 2. While this isn't as great as the original Incredibles, I do still have a lot of fun with the sequel. Part of that definitely can be attributed to the fact that we're finally getting to see these characters again after a 14-year-long gap between the films, but I do love how we expanded the story and our characters in this sequel. It's not as fresh or unique as the original, but I still think it holds up on its own quite well. But it still has that charm and some great superhero action along the way. Just hopefully we don't have to wait another 14+ years for a third film. At number 13, I have Up. While this film is probably most well known for the fact it has one of the most sad openings to a film ever, after that though, it is a very enjoyable watch. It's quite an eclectic group of characters on this adventure in the film, and while it's not one of my favorite adventures in Pixar, I do think the great humor all around makes up for it. Even outside of the opening of the film, I think this film has some of the most emotional weight of any of the stories in Pixar, and I think that alone makes this one of the most memorable Pixar entries. Coming in at number 12, I have Lightyear. Just as a concept as a whole, having this film being set within the Toy Story universe and a way to expand it, I do think that was quite interesting, but even as a standalone adventure, I do think this is a very fun, exciting sci-fi outing. While it is kind of a bummer that Tim Allen isn't voicing Buzz Lightyear in this, it does make sense in canon, I suppose. I think Chris Evans does a great job making the character his own in this film, though. They delve into a lot of interesting stuff here with Buzz as a character and give us some really interesting insight that we haven't really seen before in the character. And due to that, there are some really unexpected twists and turns in the story. The cast in general is pretty great, even outside of Lightyear. I still think my favorite character out of the bunch is Socks. I mean, he's an adorable cat character. How can I not like him? It's become obvious at this point that the CGI at Pixar is phenomenal these days, but this is probably the best they've ever done. Like, it's scary realistic, and it does enhance all of the amazing action sequences and the sci-fi elements. It's really exciting stuff here. It does still feel kind of weird that this is like an in-universe Toy Story movie, but as a concept, it's a pretty cool idea. The story itself that we go along in this film, you know, it kind of drags in the middle, but otherwise, the experience is very exciting, especially if you're a big Buzz Lightyear fan. At number 11, we have Toy Story 4. After the way that we ended things at Toy Story 3, I really genuinely felt like we closed the book on these characters and could move on to something else. But after Toy Story 4, it actually won me over, and it made me excited to explore new adventures with all these characters. While I did love the new additions to the cast, like Forky, Duke Kaboom, and many others, it was really that deeper exploration here of Woody as a character that really hit me emotionally. Sure, the fun hijinks is always great in these films, but the deeper level here that we went with Woody, you know, I just love that stuff. I'm excited to see where we go in the future. I mean, obviously we had Lightyear, which isn't the future at all, but if we go somewhere in the future with these cast of characters, I am very excited. At number 10, I have Ratatouille. While this certainly is is one of the more strange ideas for Pixar. I think it is just very well executed. Brad Bird is one of my favorite directors working today, and this film is a testament to that because he does an excellent job here balancing this goofy concept while also weaving in this great-looking food and interesting themes like pursuing your passions. Ever since Everything Everywhere All at Once came out, though, all I can think about with this film especially is Ratatouille. If you haven't seen Everything Everywhere All at Once, you'll understand that joke, but you should see the film. It's not Pixar, but it is fantastic. At number 9, I have Soul. Since I am older, I think this film does resonate with me a bit more than the younger audiences. I found it to be a great film with very mature subject matter, exploring all of these different aspects of life, but in an uplifting way. It's an entertaining adventure thanks to our fantastic great leads that we follow along this journey. But even outside of just its messaging, I love how we weave in this fantastic music throughout the story. While it is targeted for an older audience, I do think younger audiences still can find something to appreciate about this film. At number 8, I have Inside Out. Just as a concept, this is such a fascinating idea for a film. Navigating this exploration into these various different emotions inside of us, and along with it, this fun visual representation to show how different each stuff plays out inside with these characters. This is probably one of my favorite ensemble casts, especially excelling in the comedic category. I found it to be a lot of fun just seeing how these different emotional responses play out and how different they are. As per usual with Pixar, this too has some great themes for all ages, and Pete Docter is probably one of my favorite Pixar directors if you haven't noticed yet. My number 7 pick is Monsters, Inc. This is probably my personal favorite out of all the Pete Docter films that he's done for Pixar. Having them showcase all of these monsters in a much more positive light overall, the dynamic between Sully and Mike completely sells me on the film. And since they have such fantastic chemistry, and then you throw Boo into the mix, it's a classic. It's one of the Pixar films that I throw in when I need a good laugh. It's fun, lighthearted, engaging. It even has some solid emotional elements here with the relationship between Boo and Sully. It's just a great film. At number 6, I have Toy Story 2. While it's a very simple setup here for the sequel, having Buzz go on an adventure to save Woody, it's still quite the fun adventure. Not only is that aspect of the adventure quite entertaining, but I did love all of the crazy stuff that involved Woody's storyline as well. I really like the new additions to the cast, especially Jessie. You truly feel for her when you learn more about her in that Sarah McLachlan song. It's right up there when it comes to the most emotional Pixar moments, right up there with the opening to Up. The emotional elements hit really strong, but same with the comedy. It has a great balance in Toy Story 2, and it's probably one of the better overall sequels in the entire Pixar franchise. At number 5, I have Toy Story 3. Now, for a period of time, I did think this was the perfect end to the trilogy. Now we have Lightyear, Toy Story 4, all that stuff. But even still, I think this is a great film. Part of why it was so emotional is because I was around Andy's age when these films started coming out, so it felt like I was kind of growing up with Andy, and this was the conclusion to that arc. With Toy Story 3 feeling like the final outing, this probably has the highest stakes and sense of danger in the series due to the fact that everyone's stuck in this daycare thanks to Lotso, who's surprisingly quite a good Pixar villain. He's probably in my top 5 Pixar villains of all time, just because he seems so nice and then he just turned. The emotional elements definitely are at an all-time high in Toy Story 3. There are many points where you get really teary-eyed because it looks like the Toy Story characters are going to actually burn to death, and then you have on top of that the stuff with Andy kind of passing the torch to all the characters to Bonnie, and it felt like the great ending to the trilogy. Of course, now we have Toy Story 4, and that kind of continues it on with Bonnie, but even if you ignore that, I do think this is still a solid conclusion. At number 4, I have Finding Nemo. This is just such a charming film all around. There's so much to love about the world of Finding Nemo. It's filled to the brim with such great characters with loads of personality, and I do think that adds to the entertainment factor. It's vibrant, colorful, and it's extremely quotable. It's probably in the top 5 most quotable Pixar films. And like with the best Pixar films, I love the messaging behind it. And with a film like Finding Nemo, I think depending on your age, you'll get different lessons out of it, whether you're Marlin's age or Nemo's age, because there are some lessons to be learned from either side. As you see, it's like whatever it takes to protect your kids, but also knowing when it's the best time to not go overboard with the restrictions. Some great lessons to be learned here, which is what you want in the best of the best in Pixar. At number 3, I have Coco. Ever since Coco came out, I've adored this film so much. It hits a little bit personally just due to the fact that I am of Hispanic descent, but regardless, this film is just so special. Not only is it gorgeous visually, but I think the story is beautiful. The dynamic between Miguel and Hector is a joy to watch, while the story they're telling here is just filled with so much emotional weight, tackling things like death, family, and many other things along the way. Ernesto de la Cruz probably is one of the best Pixar villains. Sure, it was a bit obvious he was going to be the villain. That was kind of like a problem with Disney Pixar films in general lately, that the villain twists really aren't that surprising. Nevertheless, he is extremely memorable, and same goes for the segment where Miguel is singing the Mama Coco Remember Me. That hits me in the heart like every single time. It's probably one of, if not the most emotional moment Pixar-wise for me. Such a great film, so powerful. At number 2, I have The Incredibles. I am a massive superhero film fan, so you can imagine why it wasn't that hard for me to also love The Incredibles. It's another one of those Pixar films where I just completely fall in love with the world, and all the characters, especially The Incredibles themselves, who are all such interesting and unique individuals with such cool and different power sets, which makes it even more exciting when we get to see all of them in action with these big, over-the-top action set pieces, whether they're fighting off different types of villains, or Syndrome, our main villain, who is probably one of the most fun villains in the Pixar universe. He's very funny, he's very charismatic. But other than the main cast, I do think Frozone and Edna Mode are both the big scene stealers here, especially Edna Mode. She is so amazing, and it makes it more funny to me that Brad Bird himself is the one voicing the character. It's kind of blown my mind since I found it out when I was younger. I just love this franchise. I wish that we had more stuff in the Incredibles universe because we only have 2 films, but I need more. We need to see more Incredibles in the near future, hopefully. And at number 1, I have Toy Story. While many of the films in this top 10 I consider classics, whether they're Pixar or not, this is one of my favorite films overall in general. As a kid, I instantly fell in love with Toy Story, and that's never really changed as an adult. It's such an ambitious film, and it holds up really well after all this time with the way that it mixes its adventure and comedy. Even as an older person, I enjoy this film so much. Having that dynamic here, the battle between Woody and Buzz Lightyear, it's iconic. I mean, the dynamic itself has kind of been a testament to the Pixar formula, and this was like the beginning of that formula, having these really awesome duos that we saw for many Pixar films going forward. It's just a film as a whole that is perfectly executed to its themes, to its comedy, to its adventure elements. It's a classic for a reason, and I think this is probably still their very best film they've ever done so far. But there you have it. That is my new updated ranking for the Pixar franchise as a whole. It's been a lot of fun talking about all these different Pixar films with you guys. There's a lot of Pixar films, so there's a lot to pick from if you're going to give your personal rankings down below, because like I said, I want to know your guys' Pixar rankings in the comment section. Share them all down below, because I am really intrigued to see how different everyone's rankings are, whether you've seen Lightyear or not, because they are doing some early fan screening events earlier on in the week. I'd love to know your thoughts down below. How would you rank all the films? Like I said, I appreciate you guys so much checking out the rankings. I know it's quite a long video, which is kind of out of the norm for a lot of my content. If you have made it this far, make sure to leave a like on the video, and also subscribe to the channel so you always update my reviews, rankings, unboxings, reactions, all that jazz on the channel. But until the next time, I'll see you guys later.